Okay, welcome super secret agent trainees to WhizGirls Academy. Today we have the amazing Erika Wagner from Blue Origin. Erika's going to tell us about her journey. She's our master teacher trainer today, and we're going to learn all about her journey from like MIT to X Prize to Blue Origin, and she's going to tell us all about it. So welcome, Erika.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. So tell us about your childhood.
Yeah, I'll show a few pictures because I think sometimes a picture is really helpful in this. I talk about what we're doing now at Blue Origin as building a road to space. And what we're trying to do is figure out how to open up space so all sorts of people all over the world can use it to do all sorts of things. And I'll get there in a few minutes. But this is where I always like to start my story because this is the first book I ever remember owning. And it was all about space. I was probably, kindergarten when I got this book. And it was Snoopy talking about the planets and astronauts. And I remember reading about Valentina Tereshkova, who was the first woman to ever go to space. And so even from a really young age, I had this sense that this was something I could do in a world I could see myself in. And I was really excited about what that meant and what possibilities that could open up. This is one of my all-time favorites. It's not me, but I do hope someday to get a chance to go up to space and to look down on our home planet and see it from the outside and contribute to the world using space as a tool for learning and for research. Where I think about where this started, when I was a kid, I had a chance. I was growing up in Atlanta, Georgia, and I went on a field trip over to Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama. And I later got a chance to go to the actual space camp, which is like a 1-week camp for kids that are excited about space. And it was the first time that I realized that this thing that I had a passion for, that I had loved my whole life, going outside and looking up at the stars and thinking about what the astronauts were doing and watching the launches on TV. It was the first time I realized that that wasn't just me, that there was a whole community of people who are really excited about this stuff and that there was a career path there. There was ways that I could go and do this for the rest of my life. And so that was really empowering as a young kid to say, oh, wow, there's this thing I want to do. I'm really excited about it. How do I get there? And so I started talking to people about, well, how do you become an astronaut? What do you need to do? And they said, well, you need to get really good at math and science. You need to get really good at teamwork. You need to get really good at communications. And so I started to do a lot of those things because they were things I loved to do as well. I joined my science club at school. I joined a soccer team. I joined a marching band. I did a lot of things that were learning these skills that were sort of how I saw a path to a career in space and the kind of person I wanted to be when I grew up. And sure enough, that led all sorts of awesome places. I took some detours along the way. It wasn't always just about space. I was really excited about things that I saw at aquariums and thought maybe I would be a marine biologist. And then I found out I got really, really seasick. And so that sort of turned me off of that a little bit. I love being outdoors and hiking and being on trails. My dad and I did a lot of volunteering with the U.S. Forest Service. I thought about being a forest ranger. And I realized that this was one of those things that I could do my entire life without necessarily making a career of it. I could be in the woods and being a champion for nature, but it wasn't going to be my career. And then I started thinking about, well, what does it mean to have a career in space? And the only thing I saw on TV was they talked about, astrophysics and people showing images from telescopes. And I thought that was interesting. But the more I got into what the day-to-day work was, I was like, well, that's mostly working with data, mostly working with images and information coming back from space. I'm more interested in how we get there and what we can do with it. And so in high school, I was part of a science Olympiad team. And one of the challenges we had was to build a Rube Goldberg machine. And for those of you who don't know who Rube Goldberg was, he was a cartoonist and he used to draw these elaborate cartoons. Here you see a kite flies out the window and it pulls a string and it swings a bird and the bird, these other things happen. And eventually, the knife cuts the string and this sort of elaborate contraptions for making the world work. And I thought, oh, well, that's how you can take science and the principles of science and connect it to making things happen. And I learned that was sort of what engineers did. And I realized that my love for science and my love for solving problems came together in a path towards engineering. So eventually I became a biomedical engineer and then later added a degree in aerospace. This is a centrifuge that I used in my research. We were studying the ways that you could spin people around and use that as a tool for aerospace medicine. Turned out I made a lot of my friends really nauseous, but we learned a lot about how the inner ear and the eyes interact and how your brain interprets signals that were important for how astronauts understand up and down and health in space. And I went on to get a degree, a graduate degree in a field called bioastronautics. And this is how do we use what we understand about engineering, how do we use what we understand about medicine to keep astronauts healthy? And then how do we use what we know about astronauts and health to make the world a better place and bring that back to the rest of us on the ground? It turns out when you're in a field like that, you can go all sorts of different places. I ended up taking a job at a place called the X Prize Foundation. And the X Prize Foundation, actually the founder of the X Prize was the guy that built this centrifuge in my graduate lab at MIT. So I'd gotten to know him. And he said, Erika, we're tackling all sorts of problems. You want to come work with us? And I got over the next few years to work on deep sea exploration and robotics, to work on global health and tuberculosis diagnostics, autonomous cars, electric aviation, brain-computer interfaces, vertical farming. It was a really exciting time when what I was learning most here wasn't how to solve these things, right? That was the job of the teams around me. We were putting out big prizes that encouraged people to do good work. What I really learned here was the power of asking good questions. And I want to talk more about that when we get into Q&A, because I think that that's one of those things that really drives curious people into interesting places in their careers. So I spent about 5 years at the X Prize Foundation, and then I wanted to get back to my passion for space. So this is a picture from me at our office in Western Texas with my friend Joseph. And what you see above us, that sort of spiraling cloud in the sky, that's actually our New Shepard rocket on its way to space. That day it was carrying 4 people to space, including William Shatner, who was a star of the Star Trek series, one of my friends from our office, Audrey Powers, who is an awesome engineer and really helped to make the New Shepard program possible. And it was really about this way that we were opening the doors of space to all sorts of new people who were going to go bring that back to their communities. Since that time, New Shepard has been the first rocket to carry the first Portuguese astronaut to space, the first Mexican-American woman, the first openly LGBTQ astronaut, the first parent and child, the first married couple. We've been opening these doors in so many ways, and I find that really neat. And so today I spend a lot of my time at Blue Origin working on our new space station. So we are thinking really hard about what happens when the International Space Station, that's been up there for 20 plus years, but it's coming to the end of its life. And it's NASA saying, okay, we need to know what comes next. So I'm working with a team to design the next generation space station and figure out how we use it to do research, and how we use the power of gravity to answer questions in biology and materials science and manufacturing. How we do international collaborations. And we're working with space agencies all over the world to make sure that this is really open to folks all over the world. And also, how do we do education? How do we make sure that the next generation of STEM leaders have a chance to go send things to space, to learn from space, and to be part of the journey we're taking? So with that, I'm going to stop doing slide presentations and figured maybe we could just have a conversation if that works for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was a really great, insightful space into your journey, literally, and seeing the pictures and everything. I think our super secret agents will be really excited when they're watching this. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your passions and hobbies as a child, and if you had a dream job.
So dream job was definitely to be an astronaut. I've wanted to do that since literally before I can remember. I was so young that I don't remember what started it. I just know that it's always been one of those things on the horizon for me and something I've dreamed about for a really long time. When I was a kid, I played soccer. I played flute and then French horn. I did a lot of hiking and camping with my family, and we were really into being outside. And I love just to, hang out with friends and read books and play video games. We had an early computer, so I learned how to program when I was pretty young. So I think those things all sort of came together for me in thinking about a career in engineering that made it possible to think about it both as part of my lifelong dreams and the way I like to play. Right? It's great when you have a job that feels like you're doing what you love.
So true. I know what that means. Curious to hear when you heard about the word STEM, and did you have any mentors along the way?
I don't think I heard the word STEM until maybe college. I was certainly aware of all of the S, the T, the E, and the M, but I don't think I heard it as a term until much later in my life. I really like to think about STEAM, putting the arts in. I think that that's a really important part of what we do, and in fact, we've done a number of really cool projects at Blue Origin with the arts. We did a contest with the band OK Go, who makes these wild music videos, working with middle school, high school kids to think about art you can only make in space. We worked with an awesome artist from Ghana. His name's Amawako Boafo. And Amawako came down and painted 3 portraits on top of our New Shepard rocket. And we launched those portraits to space. And as they came back down, he used that to tell a story about the journey of himself and his community and the ways that they experience space. And we've been working to think about for the Orbital Reef Space Station, how do we make sure that arts are a part of that journey as well? And it really takes science and technology to make art happen in a lot of ways in space. It's a challenging journey, but it makes it so much more worthwhile. And you asked about mentors. I've had mentors all along the way, great teachers. Mrs. Schmitz, who was my second grade teacher, Ms. Dutter, who was my physics teacher, Ms. Schmidt, Ms. Spear, who was my calculus instructor. Like those were really formative teachers for me throughout my school career. And then as I got into graduate school and got into the workforce, I started to have a more formal mentorship. I was assigned mentors. I had discovered mentors. I asked people to be my mentors because I wanted to learn from their experiences. I knew that I certainly didn't know what that road ahead looked like. I knew what the end goals were, but I didn't know how to get from here to there. So sometimes it started with as simple as saying, how did you get where you are? What did you do? What worked? What failed? And sometimes it got to be more detailed advice. When I was having in my first job search, I would go and talk to people about, well, how do I get this job that I want? Can you read my resume? Can you help me prepare for my interview? Can you give me some advice on the kinds of things that are different between school and work? So mentors certainly are super important all along the way.
So true. Yeah. All right. So can you explain what Blue Origin is and why, what you do there and why it's so important?
Yeah. So Blue Origin is a private space company. We are owned by Jeff Bezos, who was the founder of Amazon.com. So if you've ever bought a book or something on Amazon, thank you. You're also helping us to build rockets. We are a company that's dedicated to a future where someday we can have millions of people living and working in space for the benefit of Earth. And I think all 3 pieces of that are really important. So living and working in space means that you're doing something that's really of value, right? It's not just going to go, but it's going to create value. Millions of people means someday we have to figure out how to do this, not just for a little crew, but for entire communities. And that leads us to think about, how do you do things at scale? How do you do things with sustainability in mind? How do you do things with economics in mind? And for the benefit of Earth, for me, is why I've been at Blue Origin for more than 10 years. Because some people say, oh, we got to go to space because this Earth thing, it's not working. We say we have to go to space to make this Earth thing work. And I think that that's really important. We're not trying to abandon our planet. We're trying to figure out, how do we tap into the power of space, the resources of space, the magic of space, to make our home planet be more sustainable and a place that we can continue to live and thrive. In fact, if you look at the name Blue Origin, it sort of speaks to that. It speaks to that day when we're someday traveling far away from Earth and we're looking back and we're saying, that dot, that blue dot right there, that's our origin. That's where we come from. And that's what matters most.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful. And thank you, Jeff Bezos, for letting us be new explorers in a different way. I read somewhere in the 5th grade, you first heard about space and I think being an astronaut. Is that right?
So by the time I was 5 years old, I knew about space and wanting to be an astronaut. 5th grade was the first time I got to go to space camp.
That's what it was. Okay. And then something about high school, it came back again, like you did something else in high school that it came back again. And then at what point did the engineer, like you decide to become an engineer?
So I didn't even know that engineering was a possibility until high school. I was probably in 9th or 10th grade, and I was living in Atlanta. The Georgia Tech is the big engineering school in Atlanta, and they had a event hosted by their Society of Women Engineers for girls to come in from all over the city and to learn about what engineering was. And I sort of knew that engineering was a thing and that it was, people design things, but I didn't realize how broad it was. And so that day I got to meet biomedical engineers that were doing things to solve problems in health. I met mechanical engineers who were thinking about cars and planes and robots. And I met electrical engineers who were learning how to collect data and drive electronic systems, and computer scientists. And it gave me this sense that there was this whole world of possibilities that I knew nothing about. And I really got excited about that because it seemed to connect to the things that I loved most in bringing science tools to solving problems that mattered in the world. So that was really a big catalyst for me. I then went on to learn more. I went on to do some engineering competitions in high school and ultimately applied to be an engineering student in college.
Wow. And at what point did you decide to go back and get a PhD?
So let's see here. Undergraduate, my education was in biomedical engineering. I was at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And I was getting to the end of my undergrad time, and I had started to do a little bit of research, working with a former astronaut that was at our university, and starting to understand where space and health came together. And I learned about this thing called the NSBRI. It was called the National Space Biomedical Research Institute. And I said, wow, there are people who do biomedical engineering completely focused on space. And they're not necessarily doctors. I liked medical work, but I didn't know that I wanted to be a physician. But this idea that biomedical engineers were helping NASA solve some of its important problems was one that was really attractive. So I went into my advisor, who's one of my mentors, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about going to graduate school. I think I'll go and get a master's degree in this bioastronautics field or in aerospace engineering. And this was one of those places where I really learned about how the system worked. My parents hadn't gone to graduate school. I didn't really have a great mentor that could show me the way. And my advisor said, do you really think you only want a master's, or do you think you might want to get a PhD someday? I said, well, maybe a PhD someday, but I'm going to start with a master's because that's what I feel like I'm ready for. She said, when you apply, check the box that says PhD. I was like, well, why? I might not stay. She said, that's okay. You can always make that decision later. But if you check the box that says PhD, it opens up all sorts of opportunities for someone else to pay for your education. And that was really important to me. Our family wasn't particularly wealthy. It was important to me to have resources that would help me pay for school, so I could do the things that I wanted to focus on. I ended up being able to get jobs working in the lab instead of having to work at Starbucks and time working in the lab. It let me focus on my education and my research. And so that little insight from someone who had been down the path before really opened up this whole world of opportunities for me. So I got my master's degree. I stayed for a PhD because I was excited enough. I had questions I really wanted to answer. I was studying the effects of gravity on health, and I had been working in my master's thesis on that centrifuge you saw, studying the inner ear and the sensory systems of astronauts. My PhD work, I ended up working in muscle and bone health, trying to understand why astronauts lose so much muscle and so much bone when they're in space and what we could do to help them. So it was really starting to get this whole sense of why medicine was important, why biomedical engineering was important as we reach farther and farther out into the solar system. And how do we use engineering tools to solve those questions?
Very interesting. And you mentioned space camp a couple of times. So can anyone go to space camp? I mean, I think you went originally when you were like 5th grade. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's, I think it's ages 8 to 18. And there's also space camp for adults and teachers. So kids of all ages. But it's an open program. It does cost money, but there are scholarships. I remember my first year that I went, I got a scholarship, and I saved a lot of money from babysitting to help pay for the other expenses of being there. So it's one of those programs that is for kids that are passionate about aviation and aerospace and There's a number of different programs within the Space Camp family, some that are very focused on missions to space, some that are focused on folks that like airplanes and aviation. There's a new camp on cybersecurity that they run and robotics. So lots of different views into that world. But the thing that I love most about it is that it's about a week-long camp. And you take a lot of classes to learn about the fundamentals. They're teaching you a lot, really deep experts in the classroom helping you to learn about these systems. And then at the end of the week, you're working towards a mission. And I know that the WhizGirls are really focused on sort of that mission orientation. So this one, for Space Camp and Space Academy, you are doing a mission to space. And they have a whole mock-up of the space station. You're assigned a role. You get a chance to be in a role that's on the mission and a chance to be in the role that's in mission control. And you get to go through all the steps that astronauts go through to think about how you would succeed when there are challenges in that mission. How do you work as a team? How do you communicate really, really well? And what are the skills that you need to have a career like this?
Wow, that's amazing. And is it one space camp, and is it affiliated with NASA or different companies? Or tell us about that if anybody and any of our secret agents are curious, because I know they've been talking about this a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, so it's at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. It's not run by NASA, but certainly there's a NASA Center, NASA Marshall Space Flight Center right nearby, and a lot of good collaborations there. So the Space and Rocket Center is a museum, kind of like the one there in L.A., where you can go and you can see the space shuttle. So it's got all sorts of artifacts, but it's also got this training academy that's essentially attached to it. It's really a neat place. You're living in an area that looks like a space station. Your habitats, you're eating food that astronauts might eat. You're sort of living and breathing what this road might look like. And you're surrounded by a bunch of other kids that are excited about it too.
So you're literally having that same experience as astronauts, except not in space, but you're getting kind of like the training in a sense.
There was a great movie made in the 1980s in which a group of space camp kids accidentally get launched to space. Unfortunately, that's never happened in real life. We kept hoping it would.
And what is the name of the movie?
Space Camp.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So yeah, our super secret agents probably weren't around back then, but they can, I'm sure, Google it and find this movie. It sounds really familiar. I think I want to watch it. But the one that comes to me is the one with... I think it was actually Spaceballs, which is probably not. Yeah, that was like a joke, kind of a funny.
Also a great movie.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so I know that you started the X Prize Media Lab at MIT. So tell us how that happened and a little bit more about how you got into X Prize originally.
Yeah, so I mentioned my friend Peter Diamandis, who had been in the same lab as I had been at MIT. He was a mentor of mine. So there we are, back to mentors again. And Peter was so X Prize Foundation is a nonprofit that looks to drive change by offering big prizes for big breakthroughs. So their first prize, the Ansari X Prize, offered $10 million to the first private team to be able to build a spacecraft that could go to space twice in 2 weeks. And that was a big challenge. It had never been done before. The private companies had never gone to space. It had always been governments. And so they really drove all of this investment and 27 teams working all over the world trying to get to space. The vehicle that ended up winning is called Spaceship One. It actually now hangs in the Smithsonian, in the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., next to the Spirit of St. Louis, which was the first airplane to fly across the Atlantic, next to the Bell X-1 aircraft, which was the first one to break the speed of sound, above the Apollo 11 capsule, which was the first to go to the moon. So it's really sort of has this place in aerospace history because it was the first time that people like you and I could just go. So X Prize Foundation was working on all sorts of other things. And one of the things my friend Peter realized was that we needed more students to get involved in helping us think about what were the challenges we needed to tackle next. How did we ask these good questions about that would drive change in the world? How did we get people working on solving these challenges once we had the questions asked? So we came up with this idea of having a laboratory at MIT, tapping into some of the brightest students we knew. And we just hosted a meeting of a bunch of folks at MIT and said, hey, we have this idea. And we came out of the meeting and there seemed to be a lot of support for it. And Peter turned to me and he said, Erika, what are you doing next year? And I said, I don't know yet. He said, well, I think you should run this. And I was like, wow, to actually be able to take this idea that we have and run with it Sounds incredible. So we stood up classes, we stood up some research, we started to find collaborators, and we began to teach this series of classes that were asking, how would you design the next X Prize? And every time we taught that class, we would dive deep into a different area of technology, and we would bring in a bunch of experts to teach our students what was the cutting edge of this technology? What was stopping it from going further? What would be needed for it to be not just 2 times better or 3 times better, but 100 times better than it was today? And so we got to work in all of those different technology areas I was showing you earlier, cars that drive themselves and brain-computer interfaces, and farms that are in buildings and more efficient than ever before. And it gave us a chance to really explore the art of the possible. And that was a pretty awesome journey.
Very cool. And how long were you running that for? And what was that experience like to do something like that from scratch?
I love to start new things. I've been starting new things since I was a student. I helped start clubs at my school in high school, and I did a bunch of startup work in undergrad. So for me, this is the stuff I love. It's just to take an idea and make it real. So that was really fun. I ended up working for the X Prize for a total of 5 years. We spent 3 years standing up the lab at MIT, a couple of years spinning it out to other universities around the country, including USC there in Los Angeles. And then I eventually took over as the senior director of exploration prizes and was helping to design our next generation prizes and get them out into the world. A lot of work in the health of the future of the oceans. Very concerning what's going on with climate change, carbon dioxide levels rising. That carbon dioxide, some of it gets sucked into the oceans. And what it turns out is that changes the pH of the oceans. It makes it a little bit more acidic. And when that happens, we see that shellfish don't form their shells as well. We see that there's a lot of problems with the health of plants and animals in the oceans. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we monitor that and how do we help stop that problem?
Very interesting. All right. So tell our super secret agents how they can get into engineering, like what they need to do, and like what your biggest piece of advice would be.
So I think the biggest thing about engineering is to be curious. To be curious about what the problems are, to be curious about the solutions, to be willing to try a lot of things, to try a lot of ideas on, and see what works, right? You've all learned the scientific method where you see something, you make a hypothesis about it, you test the hypothesis, you refine that based on your data. That's really the engineering process as well, right? You see a problem that you want to solve in the world, and you gather a bunch of information about it. And what's really the problem here? What's really going wrong? How could I solve that? If I push on this piece of the problem, does it change that piece of the problem? And then getting data and continuing to refine your ideas. So I think that would be my number one piece of advice, would just be to stay curious and keep asking questions.
That's a really good piece of advice. And I think it's all about really being curious to, where it leads you, because you never know. But in your case, you were all about space. So you've been on I call it being on the yellow brick road. So space has been your yellow brick road.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Okay. So what did you learn when you were 11 years old that you have kept with you today?
That's a good question. There were a couple of signs that I remember seeing on the wall at school that have really stuck with me my whole life. One said, "Success comes in cans." And I remember seeing it the first time. It's like, cans, not bottles. And then I sat and I stared at it and I was like, no, it comes in like, I can. You can do this. And it's something that I think is so true. When we think we can do something, when we think it's possible, then you start to try. And when we think that something is impossible, we don't even bother trying. So I think that sort of can-do orientation was something I learned when I was pretty young, and it's really stuck with me. Another one, it seems really simple and really trite in some ways, but there, on my wall when I was that age, I had a little poster that said, "Reach for the stars." And for me, it was originally this sort of reminder of space, right? And that I was working towards something. But I think it's also something that goes beyond that as well. And it's when you reach for something that's nearby, you'll almost always get it, right? But if you reach for something further and further and further and further, you start to run into the amazing things in the world. And the farther you reach, the more you end up, sort of grabbing onto and seeing what's possible. So I think that having that North Star, that very distant goal, and going after it, you even if you don't ever quite get there. I still haven't gone to space yet, right? Not to say that it won't happen in my lifetime. I'm still trying. But I've run into so many other gifts along the way just because I was reaching for those far dreams.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to switch to some student questions that came in earlier. Some of them are comments, but I'll still read them. You are a real life role model and a superhero. Have you had someone who inspired you along your STEM journey?
Yeah, I'm going to think about one particular story, and it's the first astronaut I ever met face to face. His name is Dan Barry. He was a great astronaut, a roboticist. He was on Survivor for a season, all sorts of crazy stories. But I remember sitting down with Dan, and I was working at NASA Johnson Space Center. I was a summer intern. In undergrad, still didn't know anything at all about the world, but I was learning. And a friend had introduced me to him, and he was kind enough to take my invitation up to go have lunch one day. And I said, Dan, I really want to be an astronaut when I grow up. What should I do? He said, you should do what you're passionate about. And I was like, well, but does that lead me down the path where I can get selected? He goes, well, no other path will. If you're not doing something you're passionate about, the world can tell, right? And you can tell. And you get so much more energy out of chasing the things that you are really excited about. Some folks have said if you are doing what you love, you'll never work a day in your life because you're always going to be doing what matters to you. And I think that Dan's advice was really, really good, because the path to whatever success looks like for you is to be constantly doing the things you love and the things that challenge you, right? It's not like, only eat the chocolate, don't eat your vegetables, but it's about, when you're excited about these things, it's worth doing the hard work. It's worth doing the things that are challenging to you, because you're on the path that you love.
That's a really good point. We didn't talk about challenges. And I feel like as students, we go through challenges. As secret agents, as humans, we all go through challenges. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenge that you've pushed through and gone through and how you got to the other side?
Wow, there's so many of them. I'm going to talk about, so when I was an undergraduate student, I was studying biomedical engineering. And when I came to grad school, I joined an aerospace engineering department. And they're both engineering. The fundamentals are really similar, but the tools that we had learned, the kinds of things that we were working on were really different. And in order to stay for my PhD, I had to pass this big test called qualifying exams. And this is a test where you have a big written exam, multiple hours long, and you also have an oral exam where you're standing up and they're asking you questions and you have to defend your answers. And I knew this was going to be really hard because most of the people in my department had been studying aerospace engineering for 4 years as undergraduate students. They were coming into this with all the tools they needed, and they were just sort of reminding themselves of the things they'd already studied. But for me, a lot of it was new. And I did 3 things to get through it. One was to make a plan. What did I need to know? When did I need to be ready? How was I going to do that? So I made my plan. The second was to ask for help. And in that case, I went and I talked to my teachers, my professors, and I said, okay, this is the thing I'm trying to accomplish. This is the plan I've got. Am I on the right trajectory? Are there other things I need to know that I don't have on my list? Help me out. And the third was to find people to work with. And so we formed a study group, a group of friends and I that were all taking the same exam, and we helped each other along the way. We motivated each other. We had study sessions together. We made up questions for each other. We did practice exams where we would take turns grilling each other. But we had a community that was there. And when the going got tough, we had people to lean on. So that's one of those places where I really felt like I got a lot of help from the people around me. I made it through the test. I got to stay and do my PhD, but it took a lot of work to do it. And it was only because I was willing to make a plan, reach out for help, and surround myself with great folks that I succeeded.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really important. I think for our secret agents to know that you can get through challenges, just like you said. That's amazing. Okay, back to the questions from them. What superpowers do you find that you have that pushed you to take you where you are today?
Ooh, that's a fun question. I appreciate that. Um, see here, I'll talk about two of them. One is that I am a super translator. And unfortunately, I don't mean that in the terms of real foreign languages. My foreign language skills are all like an inch deep. I've learned 7 different languages, but like only this much. So for those of you who speak multiple languages, awesome. That will be a skill you will use your entire life. For me, the languages I've learned how to speak are fields of study. So I can speak scientist, I can speak engineer, I can speak policy, I can speak business, and I can get all of those people to sit down at a table and help them to understand each other. And so in my career, I've often been at this intersection and I've sort of been the glue that holds the team together, or that helps a team to see what's possible, because I can understand what the experts are saying in all of these different areas and make that possible. The other superpower that my kids and I joke about is that I love to make something out of nothing. And that can be in the kitchen. You can throw me into any kitchen in the world, and I don't care what's in the pantry or in the refrigerator. I can make a dinner out of it. And it's the same thing is true when we're talking about starting a company or a laboratory or a new venture. So I think that there's a lot of very important things that come along with being scrappy and being able to take what you've got and work with it. And it's something I love to do.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. All right, looking to the future is exciting. What do you imagine for girls in STEM down the road? How can we make sure that everyone gets a chance to be part of the STEM adventure?
I look down the road and I think that this is completely inclusive. I think that there's that everything is possible, and that it's not about girls in STEM or boys in STEM or non-binary folks in STEM, and it's just about the community coming together in the art of the possible. So I think that's my hope, is that we get to the point where I think there will always be places for community, for people who have shared experiences to come together and to talk about why those shared experiences are valuable. But I hope that increasingly that we don't need to have special programs that lift up individual communities, because we'll be lifting up everybody.
That's a really good point. I think you mentioned this earlier because you said you met an astronaut that was a male, and like I had a female computer science teacher back in the day, but I wanted to be like Tom Hanks in the movie Big, which also was a male. So it didn't really matter, right? It was all about all of us doing this together. So that's a really, really good point for our secret agents to know.
We see what we have in common, right? And sometimes that's gender. And sometimes it's the hometown we came from. And sometimes it's the fact that we both love pineapple pizza. And sometimes it's the fact that we both love Star Wars. And I think that when we start to look at humans more broadly, we find that we all have things in common. And that's how you build communities. That's how you build teams. That's how you build the future together.
So true. All right. Secret agent is asking about Club to the Future. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, thank you so much for asking about that. Yeah, so Club for the Future is a nonprofit that we formed at Blue Origin back in 2019, designed to get kids excited about their futures in STEM and STEAM and space. We do all sorts of things with Club and in many communities all over the world. One of my favorites is a program called Postcards from Space. And Postcards from Space is super, super simple. You take a blank postcard or an index card and you draw your vision of the future. And it can be anything you want to. You can write a message, you can draw a picture. And we take those postcards, we load them onto our New Shepard rockets. We launch them up to the edge of space. And because we build reusable rockets, recyclable rockets, they actually come back. And so those rockets come back, they bring the postcards back, and then we mail them to the addresses that are written on the postcards. So there's something really powerful about this, and it's very simple, right? But when you're looking at a kid and they're holding something that they say, I did this, I sent this to space, and I'm only 11 years old. What can I do next? Right? I think that is the kind of thing that changes the world, because we start to see that we can reach for those stars. We can keep reaching further. So for those of you who are out there, the program is completely free other than postage. Would love to work with the entire WhizGirls community. Send us postcards. The more the merrier. We just did a program in the nation of Brunei in Southeast Asia. We got 7,000 postcards, which is 10% of all of the kids in this country. And it's a country that doesn't even have a space agency yet. Right? And already their kids are dreaming about what's possible.
Wow, I just got chills. That's amazing. So just to clarify for Club to the Future, so is there like a website or like is there an actual space like we can go to live? Like is there a location?
Absolutely. So you Google Club for the Future. It doesn't right now. We don't have physical clubhouses or club chapters. That we're thinking about what that might look like in the future. Right now, it's mostly online. There's curriculum for teachers. There's information about the Postcards program. There's ways to get on the mailing list, and more things coming.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely add that to the show notes as well for the postcards. That sounds very, very cool. All right. Let's switch back to what advice in general would you give our aspiring secret agent trainees in the audience?
This is a good question. I think we've talked about a few of them. I think that there's another one of these sayings that stuck with me for a long time, which was always happy, never satisfied. And it's an interesting challenge, right? That to see the world as imperfect, to not be satisfied with where we are, to keep trying to make it better, but to not get discouraged by that, to not get discouraged by the hard things around us, but to find where there is joy. And I think that's for me is a balance I'm always trying to strike, is to be excited, to be passionate about what I've got, to be appreciative for the many gifts that I've been given in my life, and to always still keep reaching for those stars, keep reaching farther. It's a good balance. I hope you can all find it.
That's really, really good point. Actually, going back to one thing I wanted to ask you. So you are a trustee of the Seattle Museum of Flight. You're an honoree of Space Camp Hall of Fame, a member of NAS board. Talking about balance, like how do you do all these other things in addition to your job and then having, a family and all of the things that you do?
Yeah. So there's a great analogy about a glass or a bucket. And the teacher says, okay, students, how many rocks can you put in your bucket? And they grab these big rocks and they say, well, I can fit about 2 or 3 big rocks in my bucket. Okay. Well, I have some gravel here. How much can you put more rocks in if we have gravel? And they say, oh yeah, well, I can put in a couple of handfuls of gravel around those rocks. And if you find some sand, you can fit in some sand and you can pour some water in. So even when you think your bucket is full, there's always room in it, right? If you just look for the space. So I have a few big rocks in my bucket, my family, my career. And then I have a lot of gravel, the things that I love to do when I can get it fit in around. So my community service, the Museum of Flight in Seattle is an awesome place that's doing outreach with kids all over the city, making resources available all over the world, connecting the past of aerospace with the future of aerospace, which is something I'm deeply passionate about. And then there's the things that we get to do. I love to ride my bicycle. I love to still get out and hike. I'm an absolute foodie. You can find me in kitchens and restaurants and thinking about food, dreaming about food, reading recipes about food. So those kinds of things fill in the space. I also love to do things that are totally new. I challenged myself a few years ago to always be doing something I was really, really bad at. I first went to relearn how to play guitar and relearn how to ski. Right now I'm doing circus aerial silks, big pieces of fabric that hang from the ceiling and you spin around and flip upside down. And I'm by far, I'm not the best person in the room at doing this, but it brings me joy to be learning something new. So I think you find that balance in your life by putting the first things first. The big rocks in your bucket you take care of at all times. And then you find what you have room for around those and you make sure you take time for yourself. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, it makes it hard to get everything else done.
That's great advice. All right. So how can our special secret agent trainees follow your journey moving forward? Is it Instagram, LinkedIn? Do you have a website?
So for the corporate world, blueorigin.com is a great place to get a lot of information about what we're doing. Blue Origin has feeds on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, X, on maybe on Facebook. I'm not sure if we're on Facebook right now. For me professionally, LinkedIn is a great place. You can find me on there, Erika Brown Wagner. And I'm always happy to hear from students that have been part of this journey and understand where you're going and what you're passionate about.
Thank you for that. A couple of things about Blue Origin, actually. Is there internships for our secret agents potentially down the road, and how old do they have to be to get there? And also, where is it located?
Great questions. So we are headquartered in the Seattle area, but we have 11 offices all over the country, including 2 in the Los Angeles area. Seattle, 2 in Los Angeles, Phoenix, Denver, Western Texas, Huntsville, Alabama, Cape Canaveral, Florida, a couple of locations in Virginia, and continuing to grow. We do have internships spring, summer, and fall for undergraduate and graduate age, student age students. Some great programs for folks coming fresh out of school. We have a program called our New Graduate Rotation, which is for folks who just finished their degrees in college, where you spend 1 to 2 years rotating through different assignments at Blue Origin before you figure out what's the right one, the right fit for you. Get to see a lot of different sides of the company, which is really cool. Our internship program is something that's very special to me. It is a 12-week program. We pay for your housing. We pay you to work for us. We give you a really important project. It's not that you're making copies. It's that you're actually part of our engineering team or part of our business team. And we give you a mentor to help you find your way through that journey and understand where you're going next. That 12-week period is so important for us as a company that we invite 85% of those interns to come back, either for a second internship or for a full-time job. So that it is the best interview that you can have at Blue Origin, is to spend time as an intern, and for us to get to know you and you to get to know us. It's a really incredible tool for us for recruiting, but also I think for our young employees to understand why this is a culture that's a good fit for them and their dreams.
That's awesome. You also mentioned mentorship along the way a lot. You also have been a mentor, and how does that work? Do people reach out to you if they want to be mentored? Is it something specific to Blue Origin? Tell us about that as well.
Yeah, most of my mentorship I do through more formal programs these days, or through people I work with. I'm a mentor for the Brooke Owens Fellowship. I'll put that one out there. It's a scholarship or a fellowship program for undergraduate women and gender minorities that are excited about aerospace. And that can be through any different field. We have had Brooke Owens Fellows that are engineers, physicists, journalists, artists. It's really about that passion for aerospace that unites them all. The Brooke Owens program gives you a professional mentor, a summer internship at a company that you're excited about, a chance to come together with all the other fellows for a summit in the summer where you get to meet everyone and form a community. And it's really one of the best things going in the aerospace industry right now in terms of building this incredible bond between an amazing group of folks. So I do a lot of work through them. I do some mentoring through our company, through the universities I've gone to. It's a great way for me to reach out and to lend a hand back to the folks who are coming behind me. Lots of doors that have been open for me, I would love to hold open for others.
And what is the youngest mentor, I guess, age-wise, that you are open to, or that group is open to?
For the Brooke Owens Fellowship, it's for undergraduate students. So that one's really focused on college age. I think there's a lot of great programs that are out there that are more focused on younger students. So, things like WhizGirls are a great way to start to meet folks in the community. I think that as you get really good questions, you'll find really good mentors. Because when someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I have this question," and I say, "Well, I don't know the answer, but let me introduce you to someone who might." So I think that's one of the things that comes with a little bit of experience and starting to ask those good questions. Not just tell me what it's like to be in your field. That's a great place to start. But as you start to say, well, I've been reading about this possibility, or I've been thinking about this question. Now I want to learn more about this specific thing. Mentors can be really helpful when you can ask those specific questions.
That's so true. Okay, let's do a quick 60 seconds, and then we're going to do key takeaways. All right, so favorite toy as a child?
Legos.
That's awesome. Favorite video game?
Probably the original Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, yes. Have you seen the movie?
I haven't yet.
Oh, you should see it. It's really cute.
I'll say close second would probably be Tetris.
Whoa.
And if we're going way back in the Wayback Machine, Carmen Sandiego.
Ah, yes.
All day, all the time.
Yes, yes. Have you seen the Tetris movie?
No, I'm really behind on watching my movies right now.
Yeah, you got to watch that. I have a list. And the Beanie Babies movie is really good. They're both on Apple. And also, obviously, Barbie. I mean, I was a little bit on the fence because of my background. And when I was at Mattel, they said, never, ever are we going to do a live action movie for Barbie. So, yes, interesting. Okay, favorite sci-fi?
Star Wars, though I have a soft spot for Spaceballs.
And what about Star Trek?
I was never a huge Star Trek fan. It's not that I don't think it's great media. It just wasn't what spoke to me. Firefly, Star Wars, a lot of the newer stuff like The Expanse was sort of more of the worlds that spoke to me about the challenges and solutions. I know a lot of folks that are huge Trekkies. That just wasn't my world.
Okay, favorite superhero?
Our family is an MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe family. Out of that, I think right now I might go with Shuri as the new Black Panther. Pretty incredible.
Yeah, super techy. That was phenomenal what they did with all the tech. Very cool. Yeah. All right, favorite show what you watched as a child?
Ew. There's a lot of them. I'm gonna throw back to one called Sequest DSV, which was about a research submarine that would go around the world. It had a talking dolphin and some really cool tech, and they were trying to make the planet a better place. So that was a favorite for a while.
Awesome. And what about any favorite shows now, on streaming or regular, whatever?
Big Ted Lasso fan. Loved The Good Place. Expanse was pretty incredible for its world building. Yeah, those are a few favorites recently.
Yeah, I have my belief signs around here. I just should probably post them closer so you can see them. Yeah, awesome. All right, thank you for sharing all those. Really fun. All right, so let's do key takeaways, and let me tell me if we missed anything. So please feel free to add. Okay, so pick a job that you love, find mentors, ask questions, stay curious. Success only comes when you believe you can. Try to succeed, reach for the stars. The further you reach, the more you get to reach onto. Have distant goals, do the things you love and also things that challenge you. Ask for help, find people to work with, help each other. Always happy, never satisfied. There's always room for your passions and learn how to prioritize.
I love it. That's pretty fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. It's been a phenomenal journey. We're excited to see what you do next and love to follow your journey with Blue Origin. And that was Dr. Erika Wagner from Blue Origin today. Thank you so much, Super Secret Agent trainees. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye.